Okay, so today we're going to talk about 7 things not covered by your homeowner's insurance. Think your homeowner's insurance covers everything? You might be surprised. Let's talk about the most common things we hear that people think are covered, but usually aren't. Starting with one of the biggest items, flood damage. Standard homeowner's insurance does not cover flood. Anything, none of it. If the water rises and even water backup is like the common statement, my basement flooded, so I'm covered. Not unless the water came from a burst pipe or a sewer backup is possibly coverage, or a drain backing up, but a lot of times those are extremely limited. Some companies allow a buyback for this, but typically you need a FEMA-backed flood policy, which most agents are going to offer, but very few purchase unless they are required to by the banks. The next on our list is earthquakes and sinkholes. So pretty much any type of earth movement. And these are going to be always excluded commonly. Sinkholes, think of usually our southern states, but they do happen in here in central New York, upstate New York. Earthquakes do happen. Usually they're not as severe, but they could be. And if your house comes off of that foundation work could be extremely expensive. So, and even downstate, down closer towards the New York City area, there is a major fault line. So one day we could have a very severe one that causes just catastrophic damages here. Mold. Typically people think mold is going to be covered. Well, most policies aren't going to do it. And if they do, again, this is one of those other limited items. If they do offer it, typically we're going to cover things for such as like a sudden pipe burst, or a sudden roof leak, or sudden siding blowing off and water damage. Usually the trigger is that sudden and accidental. And then we'll get some mold remediation in there as part of the repair. But again, usually sudden and unknown are the triggers on this. So for instance, if you had a leaky roof for a real long time and didn't do anything about it, you had just a vapor barrier on the side, the house isn't done correctly, so the house is holding moisture in the siding or in the insulation. High humidity areas like bathrooms, if it's not vented properly, typically aren't going to have any coverage for that. And that could be quite a bit, making people sick, as well as the repairs could be quite costly here. So our fourth item coming up is pest damage or animals. So think of termites, rats, squirrels, raccoons, even birds. So a lot of these they consider preventable maintenance issues, not accidents. The sudden and unknown, so if something comes in and cuts a wire, typically we'll get coverage back for that. But like the termites, if they chew apart a main structural post in your house and it settles and it causes catastrophic failures, you might not be covered. They view it more as a maintenance issue rather than a insurance. Some companies might give you back some coverages here, but again, sudden and unknown are usually our triggers for this. Bringing us to our fifth item on the list, we have contractor or renovation mistakes. So you think you hired a contractor, and let's say a big item we get is, well, I hired a contractor and they didn't do the roof installation correctly, so now it's leaking. Well, we've seen it in the past years that a lot of times we'll pay for the damage to the inside, but we're not going to replace that roof if they weren't doing it correctly. If there's a defect in their work, then it falls back on that contractor, which brings us to a very important subject of making sure your contractors are insured in case they hurt someone or damage your property. Making sure if you're in an area where they need to be licensed, you want to make sure they're licensed. And another thing is, it's usually a huge ask, but asking for them to be bonded, because the bond is going to be, it's not insurance, but it's pretty much a guarantee of the work to be done. So that's another important area. That's where you're going to see that, making sure the work's actually done so they don't take your money and run. Bringing us to our sixth item, intentional damage or neglect. If you have a lack of maintenance, let's say you know of something happening to the house, something keeps, like a tree branch, keeps rubbing a house, tearing apart the siding or tearing apart the roofing, and you just say, well, I'll get to it. Well, that's not going to be okay. Again, that sudden and unknown. If you know about it, you can see something's damaged and you don't do anything about it, and then all of a sudden causes thousands in damages. Not going to happen. Or you're horsing around and you go through the sheetrock or something like that. That's not a covered peril. Bringing us to our 7th item, business equipment or liability. Many of the policies won't cover anything for business. That even includes such things as sales of lawn sales and selling a vehicle on your lawn. A lot of the companies will offer coverage up to like a sale receipt of like $1,500 or $2,500. That's for the whole year. So if you sold a car on your lawn, you're now a business. And therefore, we're going to exclude anything that happens to those people if they come on the property. As well as we're not going to cover if you bring home your business laptop or any of your other business property, your tools, things like that. We're not going to cover that. Your work tools for a contractor or for a electricians, your plumbers, even your mechanics. We're not going to cover those tools that are meant for your business on your homeowner policy or your renter's policy. So be very, very careful. You need to have a separate policy for that, separate coverage. So you can see where when people say my insurance covers everything or I'm covered, I'm fully insured. That's not the truth. There's exclusions on all these policies, and some of these do give us back the coverage, but it's so limited that it's not enough to do anything meaningful. We already discussed all the basement flooding, so that's a very common thing, the backup of septics and things like that. So you have to be very careful and make sure that you have that extra coverage on for sewer backups, plumbing backup coverage there. And then again, with the contractors, not to beat a dead horse, but if the contractor messes up, my insurance will fix it. Well, no. We keep seeing this time and time again where unlicensed, unqualified contractors, uninsured, are doing work very poorly, and then there's issues. And it's costing people, at least double what hiring a more expensive contractor would have had. So it's not your policy's job, but we got to make sure we have these things covered. So we're happy to help you review your policy. We'll tell you if you're missing these coverages. We're supposed to tell you what you're missing and advise you on what the repercussions of not having it will be. We're happy to talk to you. We won't charge anything for this. Just give us a call. Again, thank you. And subscribe.